started here, so I'm just going to introduce Dr. Kirk Parsley here. Kirk and I met the first year when I opened the gym. Kirk came down and he actually joined the gym. And
3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago, yeah. And he's good friends with Rob Wolf. Rob Wolf helped me open the gym and everything. So, and 3 years ago, Kirk gave a similar kind of talk. And from that point on myself, I have been very, very strict with myself about sleep. And I've probably, Kaylee can tell you, I'm sure I've averaged 8 hours a night since that time. And I really rarely miss. And even if I miss, I nap and like try to make it up later in the day. So like, I've been using his product Sleep Remedy for that whole time too, and I feel the difference in performance for me has been really huge. That being said, Kirk is actually quite knowledgeable on quite a wealth of topics, so if he goes off of sleep, I don't mind either. So if you have questions later, we can go, but without further ado, Dr. Parsley.
Y'all will drive me off topic if you want, because otherwise I'll go on sleep and then any questions Joe can drive me off. Feel free to raise your hand during this lecture. I want this to be like a talk, not a lecture, even though I use that word. And if any of you have heard my canned jokes, just laugh anyway. And if you've heard any of my questions, don't. So I usually start a lecture off with, can anyone in the audience describe or define what sleep is? Very good. Feel free to, I got it back up. Has anyone here slept before? Now you're on the hook. What is it that you do every night?
You would it's like a maintenance period.
Maintenance
Power
period.
down, your body goes through a bunch of cycles to get you cleared out and ready for the next day.
Plan for the apocalypse.
I'm sorry?
Plan for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
Stay strong for the apocalypse, yeah.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about that is that all the doctors and scientists who research sleep can't really agree on a definition either. The best we have is that there's a barrier between you and your environment, and that barrier can be overcome. So when you're asleep, all of your senses still work, right? You can still hear and smell and taste and touch and all that stuff, but your brain's just not paying attention to it. But if you hit a threshold, I can wake you up, right? So if I turn on the light and you're asleep, it might wake you up. If I make a noise, it might wake you up. If I touch it, it might wake you up. So your senses are still working, you've just kind of numbed them down. And we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But one of the most important reasons I bring that up, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Rob Rakuchik?
Rob. So if Rob walks up here and volunteers, and I smack him in the head with a baseball bat, and he falls on the ground, and he's not paying attention to his environment anymore, is he asleep? Something else, right? He's completely unconscious. If you use sleep drugs, or you use sleep alcohol, or if you use sleep drugs and or alcohol, which usually tend to go together, you're much closer to being unconscious like Rob than you are sleeping. And the reason I harp on this so much, so just to give you a little backstory, I joined the military. I joined the Navy right out of high school to become a SEAL. I did that. I got out in the mid '90s, went to college, went back into the military, do the military medical school, and then went back to the SEAL teams as their physician. Really well steeped in orthopedics and sports medicine, thinking that's what the SEALs would need. And if any of you know SEALs and you know the community, they're a lot like professional athletes. And that the worst thing you can do is take them out of their job. So they just lie to their doctors because that's the guy who can disqualify them. So if there's anything going on with them that they think might be a problem, they're not going to tell anybody. But because I had been a SEAL and I'd been a SEAL recently enough to where there were plenty of people there that I'd worked with, I'd trained with, and deployed with, and obviously had a good enough reputation amongst those guys to where people trusted me and they came to my office and they told me what was going on with them. And it was basically, their motivation was down. Again, these are all my SEAL standards, right? So the motivation sucked for them. They're still responsible, hard-driven men, so they're still getting up and doing it, but they don't feel like doing it. Their body composition shifting, like they're gaining more fat, losing muscle. their performance is getting worse, they're getting slower, they're getting weaker. Their ability to concentrate and remember and focus, you know, all getting worse. Sex drive, sexual performance sometimes. Rarely do they admit to that, but you know, the brave ones do. And just like a general sense of not feeling great, like they don't feel like they used to feel, like they don't feel like they can perform like they used to perform. And being a Western trained physician, I had exactly 0 answers for that. I was like, okay, like, I know how to recognize and treat disease. You don't have any diseases, you know, you guys are killing me. So they just kept coming to my office telling me the same story over and over and over again. And you know, their self-assessment is, you know, maybe I'm getting old and this is just the end, and I'll be like, yeah, dude, you're 32. It's all over from here, you know. But you know, they'd been through, you know, this time they'd already been in combat for 8 years, so I thought maybe it's like that combat fatigue and shell shock you've heard about from other wars, which people don't really know what that is, but it's a syndrome that's been explained. We've since re-explained it. I called it the SEAL syndrome because I lack imagination and I like alliterations. And then some researchers all got together and studied thousands of people, found all the same stuff, and called it operator syndrome. For those of you who don't know, special operators, special forces guys, we call operators. So it's the operator syndrome. And basically, again, just found all the same things that I was finding. Because I didn't know what to do, I just tested everything I could possibly test. I was like, yeah, I would go on the computer and order their labs, I'd go to the hospital, get 17 vials of blood and 98 lab markers, and I would just look for an answer. Because I wanted to find like a number that I could say, oh, that's what's wrong, fix it. And they all had a very similar pattern. There's there's a concept in biology of anabolic activities and catabolic activities. You've probably heard of those. You've probably at least heard of anabolic, like anabolic steroids. They grow your muscles, right? So anabolic means I'm taking small, simple things and I'm building big, complex things. So if I eat a steak and I digest that into amino acids, those amino acids go through my bloodstream, and if I've exercised hard or whatever, it can build my muscles. My muscles will get bigger. I have a muscle made of amino acids, which is essentially what I ate in the first place, right? So I ate a muscle and then it got broken down into its constituent parts and I built my own muscles with it. Catabolic is the opposite. So if you're starving, say, like literally starving, you're not taking in any calories, your body still needs fuel. So where does your body get fuel from? It gets it from you, right? So your fat, you can burn your fat, and you can produce energy out of fat. And you can also, well, there's lots of things you can do out of fat. You have glycogen, which is stored glucose that are like in your liver and in your muscles and some a little bit in your brain, and you can burn that. But when you need amino acids, where do you get those from? You eat your muscles, right? You eat your bones to get calcium. So if you starve long enough, you see it, right? You see pictures of people who starve, they don't have any muscle left, and even their bones are getting weaker and smaller, they're getting shorter. They lose the fibers in their skin and everything starts sagging, they look really old. So that's catabolic behavior. So you have anabolic and catabolic. Anabolic is what we want, right? They're always going on, both of them are always going on. The most catabolic state in your life, you've probably heard of, fight or flight. You've all heard of that, right? You might hit that sometimes in Jitsu, you're a grown guy or gal. But it's like the only thing that matters is getting out of this situation. So you're going to use every resource you have to get out of this situation right now. Because if you don't get out of this situation, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you can reproduce, it doesn't matter if you can fight off infection, it doesn't matter if you can repair. If you don't get out of this situation, you're going to die, right? Or somebody you know, you care about is going to die. You know, rough approximations here. Anabolic behavior is exactly the opposite. The lowest stress hormone you will ever have in your life is when you're in deep sleep. So some of you probably heard of the stages of sleep. So when you get into bed, hopefully you're prepared to go to bed and your brain's in a state to you're ready to go to sleep, and you get in the bed and you kind of have that hazy, you still hear things in the other room, you're still aware of things, maybe aware of how your body feels, the sheets wrinkled under you, something like that. But it's not quite the same, it's a little different. That's stage one, so it's kind of in between sleep, and then you hit stage two, which is proper sleep, and then you go down to stages 3 and 4, those are called deep sleep. Deep sleep, the first, and let me cover that a little more. So you go into stage 1, you go across a little time, you go down to stage 2, a little time, stage 3, a little time, stage 4, then time across this axis here, and then you come back 4, 3, 2, and then up into REM sleep, okay? Once you finish that REM cycle, go back down to stage 2, that's what we call one sleep cycle. And that's 90 to 120 minutes long. During that first sleep cycle, that's the lowest stressful amount you'll ever have at any 24-hour period of your life. And it's also the most anabolic you'll ever be, okay? Anabolic is what we want if we're looking to perform. Not just our muscles, but our brains as well. And I'll cover that too, but as most of you are probably aware, you're doing Jitsu, you're obviously athletic people. When you work out hard, do you come out of that stronger or weaker? Weaker, right? If you go to weightlifting gym and you lift a bunch of weights, you should be able to lift less weight when you get out of that gym, right? Do we all agree? You wasted your time if you walk out of there the same as when you walked in there. Feel exactly the same. Wasted your time. Jiu-Jitsu is kind of that way too, right? You've exhausted your body, but you're also exhausting your mind, right? You're trying to think. I mean, I know this game a little bit. Like I've been fitzing around for long enough to know that your brain is where most of your energy is going. You're trying to figure out what the hell is that guy doing? What if I do that? Like, what was I supposed to do? Is my hand that way, that way? And like all that's going through your head the whole time, right? So are you learning anything during that period? Show me hand you think you're learning. Okay. A little bit. You're learning a little bit. Until you go to sleep, that doesn't get consolidated. If you don't sleep, let's say if you could stay up for 3 days, and even if you didn't get exhausted, let's say you stay up for 3 days, you wouldn't remember anything that you did 3 days ago, right? Because it never got consolidated, it never became memory. When you're in REM sleep, that memory, every one of your neurons, just like a plant buds, you form these little buds, new information. Maybe I'm gonna continue that on, maybe I'm not. And when you're in REM sleep, you prune that. So you shave off the useless things, you don't shave off the things that are important, and they connect to other pieces of information. Especially, this is a great sport as an example, guys. I haven't thought to use it, but it's the perfect sport for it. Because everything you learn in this sport is reliant upon something else, right? You always have to be thinking, you can't just think about what you're gonna do with your hands, because you have to think about what you're doing with your hips and whether they're flat, what he's gonna do, where's your lever point, where's his head, controlling his head, your hips, his head, right? Like all that's going on, and it all has to intertwine and intermingle for you to actually know something. And that happens while you're asleep. And the more pieces of information the more connections you can make to that new piece of information, the more you know that, right? And then you can be creative with it. You can think of it from different angles. You go, oh, I didn't learn it this way, but now that I think about it, this is a very similar position, even though I'm upside down, my knees are in my throat. I could do this, right? And so that's when you really learn something. When you go into the deep sleep, like as we said, when you work out, your muscles are weaker. You do this sport, your tendons and ligaments are weaker, right? You've stressed those things out. They're inflamed, they hurt, especially your fingers, right? It's like all of those tendons in your fingers, like those things are killing me. If those don't repair, you can't do tomorrow, right? Or you can, but you can't do it as well. And the more of those you stack up, the better you can do it. But when you're asleep, during that really anabolic activity, that's when 100% of your testosterone is going to be secreted, okay? During its first 2 sleep cycles. About 90% of it, probably the first sleep cycle, maybe 80, 89%. That's when you're rebalancing all your hormones when you go to sleep. Now I said testosterone, everybody knows testosterone is the primary sex hormone for men. Primary sex hormone for women is testosterone. I haven't heard this before. Okay, so the way the labs register the units, it looks like women have more estrogen than testosterone. They don't. They have 10 times more testosterone than they do estrogen. Men just have 10 times more testosterone than women, and 1/10 of the the estrogen. But women, again, 10 times more estrogen, 10 times more testosterone than estrogen. Testosterone is anabolic, growth hormone is anabolic. Some of the things that testosterone turns into are also anabolic. And what they're doing is they're going in there and they're repairing those tissues. They're repairing that muscle. So when I overstress a muscle, if I really overtrain a muscle, I can actually rupture muscle cells, right? If I do enough of that, it's pathogenic, right? It's disease, and we call it rhabdomyolysis. You might have heard of that if you don't come across it. So it's like completely overtraining to the point where you're making yourself sick. But if I don't repair that, tomorrow I'm weaker, right? Because I just exhausted myself. If I can't repair tonight, then when I get up tomorrow and I try to do this, I'm coming in weaker. Now, when you were young, a lot of you are still young by my standards, but when you were really young, when you were a kid, you went to sleep and you woke up better, right? You got smarter when you went to sleep. You woke up taller and stronger and faster. When you become an adult, that plateaus somewhere around 25. And from about 25 to 35, it plateaus, right? And then you start going the other way. And the older you get, the faster that's going the other way. Meaning that if I could go to sleep tonight and repair 100%, I would wake up tomorrow exactly how I was today. And I would never age, right? It would be exactly the same every day. As you get older, you're repairing a little less, right? Now, it takes 8 hours to completely repair. So I say repair and prepare. So you've used up a bunch of your resources like glycogen stores, ATP, building up waste products, those all need to be cleared out. So we're sort of like restocking the shelves of our bodies, like all of the resources that our body needs, repairing all the damage, fighting off infections, all that stuff, digesting food, increasing our anabolic hormones, decreasing our catabolic hormones. And then, again, ideally, we wake up tomorrow better, like if we're kids, or at least the same if we can, but maybe a little smarter, maybe a little bit stronger, maybe a little bit faster. But it's the older you get, the harder it is to wake up. So it takes 8 hours, not to wake up, to wake up and improve. So it takes 8 hours. You're born into this contract. One, you're gonna die. Nobody's ever gotten out of this alive. Like you're born, you live, you're going to die. The other thing is that it takes 8 hours to recover from being awake 16 hours. You can put butter in your coffee, you can do ice baths and red wines, and anything you want to do. It still takes 8 hours to recover from being awake 16 hours. It's an approximation. We're not, this is biology, not, we're not launching space shuttles. So when I go to sleep and I go through my anabolic sleep cycle, I repair, I wake up better tomorrow. So let's say I lifted more weight than I could do. I damaged all these muscle tissues. My body and my brain used today as the template to say, oh, he's gonna try to lift all the weight again tomorrow. Let's make this muscle fiber thicker so that when we do that tomorrow, it doesn't damage us as bad. Or same thing with jiu-jitsu, right? He squeezed like this for 3 hours, and we want to try to get him to be able to do that for 3 hours without, and still feel like he can use his hand when he's done, right? So that, if that happens when you're ready to go the next day, you can progressively get stronger, and you can progressively get better at this sport. If you choose to sleep 6 hours instead of 8 hours, one, I just told you about the aging thing. You're choosing to age 25% faster, right? 2 out of 8. So if you're going to age 25% faster, that's going to show up pretty quickly if you do that your whole life. That's why you see 45-year-old people who look like they're 65-year-old. That almost always, you ask them how they sleep. That's the primary mechanism for that. It's not always that, but. If I choose to age faster, that's one thing. But I'm also waking up ill prepared, right? I haven't restocked all my shelves. I haven't gotten rid of all the waste products. So I told you it takes 8 hours. And what I meant by that is it takes 8 hours to reorganize, reallocate, clear, clean, fix what you can, and to have all the resources you need for the next day. To do the same thing the next day that you did today, a little bit better, right? So if I only sleep 6 hours instead of 8, Anybody have any idea what do I do? Tomorrow still comes, it's up to do tomorrow. So if I don't have the resources, I'm 25% shy on resources. Anybody have a guess where to get those resources?
Coffee.
Yeah. One of the things coffee does, increases stress hormones. So I use the same stress hormones that put me in fight or flight, that used my body as a fuel source and made me catabolic. I use those same things to compensate. So tomorrow, not only did I age faster, but tomorrow now I'm gonna be catabolic, right? Now, you're almost always primarily catabolic when you're awake anyway, but you're just gonna be more catabolic. One of the primary things that allows you to go to sleep, we'll talk about in a second, what makes you sleep, one of the primary things is you have to have the right level of stress hormones. If I put, if I got you to volunteer for, a sleep study, and I put you in, say, like, a pill bunker or something, just like a completely cool, dark room with nothing but a bed and a toilet maybe. No stimulation whatsoever, no noise, it's pretty cool in there, and I just said, I'm gonna leave you in here 14 hours a day, I'm gonna come let you out 10 hours a day, put you back in there 14 hours a day. The average person will sleep 12 and a half hours, as an interesting aside, because the average person is sleep deprived. But, supposing you aren't sleep deprived, if you wake up after 8 hours, and you'll always wake up, right? So even the people who slept 12 and a half hours, they woke up with no light, no noise, no stimulation, nobody woke them up, so why did they wake up? Well, their stress hormones went to the lowest point, they'll be at any point of the day, and then as they repaired, their stress hormones gradually started coming up. And to this point, I've talked about stress hormones as they're bad things. They're not. Excess, poison is in the dose of anything, right? Excess stress hormones is a bad thing, right? Stress hormones actually keep you alert in proportion to your environment. So right now, your stress hormones should be very high, right? You're just sitting in here listening to a guy talk. If somebody crashed through the building while I'm talking, all of our stress hormones would go high because our environment has changed, right? So the problem is when you go to sleep, your stress hormones, as an aside to this, your stress hormones peak around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So they go up and up and up. There's a dip around noon, 1 o'clock. That's that little lull you feel where you feel like you want to take a nap. Has nothing to do with whether you ate or not. That dip is natural. And then they creep up, they peak somewhere around 3 p.m. And if you look, according to circadian rhythms, like what's somebody's circadian rhythm, so for them, physiologically, it's 3 p.m. 98% of all the world's records are set right on there, because that's when you're the optimal you. Just like when you're in fight or flight, you're actually superhuman, right? You're faster, stronger, your reflexes are faster, your eyes are taking in more light, your lungs are taking in more air, your blood pressure is up, your heart rate's going up, your blood glucose is up. Like, you're better, but you're catabolic. So you stay there for 24 hours, 48 hours, and you'll die. So we don't want to do that. But at some point from that 3 o'clock, they start coming back down, and then they have to reach a lower point. So if I go to sleep, let's say here, my stress hormones are low enough to allow me to sleep. Well, they have to be at least here to wake me up, right? That allows me to sleep, that should be at least here. Well, if I come into it with really high stress hormones because I didn't sleep enough, do I ever get down to here? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I just have to go to sleep a little higher, right? Now, if I have a hard time going to sleep, I won't get as much sleep. And then what will happen tomorrow? My body will have to compensate by secreting more stress hormones. So when you get in these cycles, the most common form of insomnia we call psychophysiologic insomnia, which means that you can't sleep because you're worried that you're not going to be able to sleep. Okay. Women admit to this much more than men. Women, by their natures, more nurturing, more interested in relationships, more interested in other people, and they're thinking about other people and other things all day. And then they get in bed, it's the first time they're going to think about themselves. And what do you all think about? Every mistake you've ever made in your life, right? Whether or not you've ruined your child for the rest of their life, you did this, right? And that's what women do. It's comical, but it's true. But another thing that causes us to go to sleep is something called adenosine. Heard of that? Okay, so every cell in our body uses the same fuel source. So you can think of your body like you as a human being. You're trillions of versions of this little thing called a cell, right? Every cell takes in oxygen, takes in nutrients, does work, produces waste products, okay? You're a bigger version of that. You eat, you produce waste products, you take in oxygen, you exhale CO2, right? So the fuel that every single cell is using to do its work, to take in nutrients, and to excrete waste products is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So it's an adenosine molecule. This doesn't mean anything to you, but I have to say it because I'm a doctor. And you have 3 molecules hanging off of the phosphate groups, right? I take away, that's ATP, triphosphate, diphosphate, monophosphate, adenosine. Adenosine goes around to the receptors in your brain and says, we've had it. Look how much adenosine there is, man. Like, all this is sacking up because we've used up all of our energy and you feel like sleeping, right? You're just gonna be crushed, you're going to bed. That's why if you've ever stayed up for like 48 hours, you know you could sleep in the rocks right there, right? You're just so tired. Now you wouldn't sleep great, you wouldn't sleep 8 hours, but you sleep enough to get rid of the adenosine. So men, on average, have about 30% more muscle than women. Even if you take the same size, roughly the same size, woman and man, he's 30% more muscle than she is. So he's going to produce a lot more adenosine. So men have a lot more sleep pressure. And they go to sleep, even if they're stressed out of their mind, they go to sleep. Piss their wives off when they do that, but they don't have a choice. Like, they're driven, they go to sleep, and then after they do one sleep cycle, they decrease all the adenosine, they wake up because they have high stress hormones. So the reason I'm telling you all that is because the most important thing you can do to decrease or to improve your sleep, decrease insomnia, is to get rid of stress, okay? Exercise is a good thing to get rid of stress, although I find Jiu-Jitsu so much stressful. I think there might be a balance in there. Exercise decreases stress, meditation, mindfulness, not drinking a ton of caffeine, not using much of stimulants, all those things decrease stress. Having a bedtime routine, and who here has heard of the term sleep hygiene? It's the phrase sleep hygiene, right? Anybody know what it means?
I mean, military likes to use that, so they'll say stop playing interesting video games at a certain time, stop drinking, dipping, drinking caffeine, whatever at a certain period, so you can go to sleep.
There's a bunch of rules to tell you how to get ready for sleep or how to sleep well, right? And if you have access to the interwebs, you can go on there and you can find 5 billion rules for sleep hygiene. If you want to have good sleep hygiene, you got to do these 73 things. How stressful is that, right? Now you're stressing yourself out. Going, Jesus, did I check off everything? Okay. All sleep hygiene comes down to 3 things. So I'll tell you this, and you'll never need to learn anything from anyone else again about sleep hygiene. We are designed, as I'm sure most of you have heard of circadian rhythms, right? Circadian, medical language, we like to use big words. It's job security, so you feel inferior by using big words. Circadian rhythm, circa dia, circa is about, dia is a day. It means about a day. So it doesn't mean anything, right? It's descriptive, like most biology words, they're just describing something we see. But we use the sun as our cue to know when to be asleep, and somewhat to know when to be awake, but more easier to know when to be alert. So we have some nerve cells in the back of our eye that don't have anything to do with vision. All they do is they sense blue light. And when the blue light leaves our eyes, our brain starts getting us ready to go to sleep. My guess, although I didn't design the system, my guess is that it's because the sky is blue. And so a lot of blue light in our eyes tells us the sun's up. The blue light goes away. Now, just think of all of this evolutionarily. Now, this body is at least 150,000 years old. So it means we went back 150,000 years ago. It took a baby and raised them today, it'd be exactly like all of us. Like there's no changes in his body in at least that long, maybe longer. But we just go back 1,000 years, right? 1,000 years ago, what did people do when the sun went down?
Wait to bed.
They slept, right? Right? Now they didn't go, oh, sun, right? Like it's not like that. As soon as it goes in, it takes hours to get ready to go to sleep. And if you've ever been camping or just lived without electricity by choice or whatever, you'll know that it takes some time, but not too long after the sun goes down, you're gonna feel like sleeping. So the first thing is the blue light. If we decrease the blue light in our eyes, that initiates a cascade of events. A whole bunch of things start changing. And then this really famous hormone gets secreted. Everybody knows it's called melatonin. Melatonin is like the starter pistol. It initiates hundreds of cascades of events to get your brain ready to go to sleep. It does not make you go to sleep, okay? If your brain isn't functioning correctly and you just take a ton of melatonin, it's not gonna make you go to sleep. You only have so many melatonin receptors. It can aid if you somehow have a melatonin deficiency, and I'll talk about why that may happen. But melatonin gets secreted, hundreds of cascades changing all these different neuroregulators, so neuropeptides, neurotransmitters, all of this, basically your neurochemistry all starts shifting, and different regions of your brain are richer in different neurotransmitters and neuropeptides, different neurochemicals to control different regions of your brain. And what happens is a part of your brain starts secreting a lot of this neuropeptide called GABA. Heard of that? Gamma-aminobutyric acid. I have no idea why. I'm so far from organic chemistry, I don't know why it's called that, but that's what it's called. And that slows down your brain. Remember I said that when you're asleep, all of your senses still work, but you're not using them. That's what GABA does. It saturates the brain, okay? When it saturates the brain, it does both your motor cortex and your sensory cortex. So the way I interact with the world is I see things, I smell things, I feel things. It leads me to thinking things, and I interact. I talk back, or I move, or I grab things, right? So that's my motor cortex and my sensory cortexes coming together. And when all of those slow down enough, I feel like sleeping. And then the other thing that would go down, if the sun went down, pre-HVAC, right? Temperature's gonna go down, right? So my temperature's gonna go down, but if you think back 1,000 years ago, I don't have a choice. The sun goes down, it gets colder, I get colder. That's it. That's sleep hygiene. Those three things. Decrease the blue light in your eyes, decrease how much you're interacting with your environment, and decrease your body temperature. That's why, anybody here have kids? Everybody else here has been a kid, so you might remember this. We see a 5-year-old boy banging trucks together, that we throw them in bed, flip up by and say tonight, and they're gonna sleep? No, right? What do?
Read the story.
Hey, start slowing down with life, like no more banging trucks together, put those away, go do your puzzles, you know. Then you put them in a bath. Why? Lower their body temperature, right? Anybody take a 99-degree bath? I put your kid in a 99. You take like an 80-degree bath. So you're lowering your body temperature, right? You lower the body temperature, then you put them in their onesie pajamas and you put powder all over them, decrease the sensation of the skin, right? And I'm feeling a bunch of things. You put them in a bed and you start reading them a story. You don't read them some crazy adventure story. You read them some story that they've heard 3,000 times. And preferably a Dr. Seuss book, because it has this rhythm to it, right? And what you're doing is you're lulling that kid to sleep. You're decreasing his or her activity with the rest of the world. You need the same thing. For some reason, as adults, we thought, I could work on my computer at 9:59, get in bed, 10 o'clock, be asleep in 5 minutes. Doesn't work that way, right? So you need a bedtime routine as well. I don't have a lot of time to cover that, but I will cover it very briefly. Remind Shayla to send you, I have something called a sleepless stress guide. It's like a 4-page document, kind of a little workbook. She'll send it to you, you can email it to everybody or print them off, do whatever you want. And I'll give you a very quick summary of it. The number one reason I said people don't sleep, right? they're worried about not being able to sleep. So those are excess stress hormones. I sleep poorly tonight, I wake up tomorrow, I need stress hormones to get through the day. My stress hormones continually get higher. I try to go to sleep with high stress hormones. I can't sleep as well. I have a hard time falling asleep, takes longer. Then they don't go down as far, so I'm not getting the same quality of sleep. I'm not being as anabolic. My hormones are shifting. So I don't get the same benefit out of sleep that I usually get out of sleep, and I wake up with higher stress hormones, and that is a self-licking ice cream cone, right? It just keeps going. Every day my stress hormones get a little higher. I have a harder time sleeping. Now I can't sleep because I have high stress hormones. And because I'm not sleeping well, my stress hormones keep getting higher. That's a really hard cycle to break. The primary thing about that is stress though. So you have to do something during the day, exercise, do mindfulness stuff, do meditation if you can. Mindfulness is really nothing more than being in the moment. You know, just thinking about the now, not worrying about the past, not having anxiety about the future. It's just being in the moment. So when I have patients who aren't really interested and all that woo-woo fancy meditation crap, you know, the big burly man, I just say, hey, I just want you to do everything you can this week with your non-dominant hand. So I want you to brush your teeth that way, I want you to eat that way, open every doorknob that way, try to write that way if you can. Everything you do it with your non-dominant hand. Why does that work?
You have to think about it.
You have to think about it, right? If you ever try to do that for a day, you'll realize how uncoordinated you are with your non-dominant hand. It's amazing how hard it is to brush your teeth with the wrong hand. So during the day, you need to control your stress. Decreasing stimulants do that as well. Having a good diet does that. Exercising regularly does that. Having a positive mindset, outlook, all that stuff. I'll let you figure all those things out. The one thing I have people do to decrease their stress before they sleep is I say, while you're awake, while you're in sort of a good point in your day, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock or something, you still have plenty of cognitive energy. You take a piece of paper, put a line down the middle of it. On one side, you write, you know, on the right side of it, you write your to-do list. We're all different on the to-do list. So your to-do list should be as far out as you're going to worry, okay? So for women, you might need 20 pages because you're gonna think about 3.5 years from now, your daughter's wedding, and she doesn't even have a boyfriend yet, but yeah. Me is like, you know, what time am I turning my coffee pot and I'm done, right? Like that's it. So your to-do list on one side, the other side is your to-worry list. The difference between the to-do list and the to-worry list is the to-worry list is crap you don't have any control over, but you don't want to forget to worry. And you will lay in bed and go, oh man, that thing, right? Whatever. The lawsuit against you, the drama at work, whatever it is, whether or not your car is going to break down tomorrow. Things you don't have any control over, but you don't want to forget to worry about them. And you make that list, again, when you're alert, when you're awake, you're in a good place emotionally. And then you put that list, handwrite that list, and you put that on your bedside table. You set 2 alarm clocks. 1 alarm clock tells you it's time to get ready to go to sleep. Preferably that's an hour before bed-ish, an hour before bed. That alarm clock is just as important as the other alarm clock that says it's time to get up and go about your day, right? Neither one of those are negotiable, right? To some degree, the things that kill more ambition than anything is the snooze bar, right? To some degree that's negotiable, but we're gonna pretend like these are neither are negotiable at all. So as soon as that happens, you start doing those 3 things. You decrease the blue light in your eyes. I don't care if you dim your lights or wear blue blocking glasses or have a filter on your television, whatever you want to do. Decrease the blue light in your eyes. Decrease the amount of activity you're having in the world. Don't do stressful things. If you watch television, don't watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, watch something soothing, preferably something you know pretty well or something that's fairly predictable so your brain's not getting super engaged. And turn the temperature down in your house, right? Take a cold shower, you know, I'm gonna take a cold shower, just a cool shower. Or let's say not a steam hot shower. And then, you know, an hour or so later, you go to bed, you get in bed, and your next alarm clock isn't for 8 hours. Now I know that's not realistic for some of you. I understand, I've been there. You know, there's an ideal way to live and there's reality, and then like in between there, we try to compensate and mitigate with supplements and gadgets and little tricks and biohacks, if you like that phrase. So you set that alarm clock, it's time to get ready to go to bed. I get in bed, and until that alarm clock goes off the next morning, all I do is lay in bed and relax. I lay down and do progressive muscle relaxation, I meditate, I do breath work, I do whatever it is that relaxes me. I think of things that make me happy, that I'm excited, and I just lay there and I relax until that alarm clock goes off in the morning. Now, the other thing I don't want you, or the other factor of this is I don't want you to be able to know what time it is. So darken your room, like don't have, you know, intelligence coming in from the outside telling you what time it is. Darken your room, you get in bed, you lay there until that alarm clock goes off. If you wake up, you drift off to sleep, you wake up, you need to go to the bathroom, whatever, get back in bed, just lay there. If you look at the alarm clock, or if you look at your clock, you'll start doing mental math. You'll start worrying about, oh shit, here I am awake and it's 3:27 and I gotta get up at 6, and so if I get to the next 13 minutes, I'll do it. And you start doing all this mental math. Maybe I won't shower tomorrow, whatever. You start doing all this stuff and you're waking yourself up. Your stress hormones are coming up. So you don't do that. You lay in bed and you relax. When the alarm clock goes off, you get up and you go about your day. The most important part of this agreement is that the most capable you ever are is after you've completely repaired and prepared. Right? So I go to sleep tonight, I get a good night's sleep. The most capable I will be in the next 16 hours is within an hour or two after I wake up. After I kind of really awake and my stress hormones come up to an acceptable level. I've gotten out of something called my default mode network, if any of you know that phrase. That's the most capable I'm ever going to be at handling that list. That's when I should handle that list. It's on the list because it's important. Why wouldn't I go into that with the most capable me I possibly could go into it with? Okay? So that's the mindset. When you actually get your head around that and you believe what I just told you, that's when it'll all come together. But you have to do the process for a while. I don't know what it'll take. Some of you might get there in a week, some of you might take 3 months to get there. But once you actually accept the fact that the best I'm ever going to be in my entire life is after I've had a good night's sleep, and this list is important, that's why I'm worrying about it, and these are things that are going to drive me towards a future that I want, and I want all these things to happen, I'm going to handle that with the most resources as possible, right? You're not going to come into Jitsu like deliberately drunk or something, or go, I don't know, go do wind sprints or do CrossFit right before you come into the gym, because you don't have as many resources and you're not going to be as good today. And this is important to you. Why the hell would you come into it with fewer resources than you need, right? With fewer resources than you could possibly have. So that's the basics of that. That's the basics of sleep hygiene. That's the basics of getting rid of all the stress in your sleep. And I'll give you a few stats. The most important part of all this, which I omitted, I kind of talked about it in a second. The most important part that I omitted is that you have to believe that you need more sleep. You have to value sleep. So I tell people, go to Google Scholar or PubMed or like something credible, and put in sleep and anything you care about. Sleep and jujitsu, sleep and parenting, sleep and entrepreneurship, sleep and sex drive, sleep and looking good, whatever. I don't care, whatever it is you value, read until you're terrified and you go, oh my God, I'm killing my ability to reach my goals. And then once you reach there, like now we can work. So a few things that have always stood out to me, if any of you are in relationships of any sort, which includes all of us, we've done something called a couple study where you take, these were married couples, doesn't have to be, it could be any people that relate on a regular basis. And both of them are sleeping well, so 8 hours a night roughly every night. They take 2 what we call sleep adapted people, which means they're sleeping well. And then you say, tomorrow we're taking all your responsibilities off your plate. Like we have child care for you, we got somebody to take care of watering your plants, walking your dog, everything's gonna be taken care of for you. We're gonna give you some money and you and your spouse are gonna go off and have a good day. The only catch is tomorrow we want you to come, right at the end of that day, we want you to come back and talk to us, right? So they do that, but they take 2 hours of sleep away from one of the people. Husband or wife, doesn't matter which one. They go about their day, they come back, they go to the lab, they put them in separate rooms, so they can talk trash about each other. And they put them in separate rooms, and the researchers ask them the same series of questions. And it doesn't matter which one you took the sleep away from. They both say that the other one wasn't as good as they usually are. They didn't communicate quite as well. They weren't as happy. They weren't as friendly. They weren't as energetic. They weren't as compassionate. They weren't as loving. They weren't as vocal. They weren't as connected as they usually are. It doesn't matter which one you sleep deprived. You both perceive that. I think that's really important. To me, that's the most important one. Taking away 2 hours of sleep decreases testosterone by 30%. The next day, men have an unnatural testosterone meter. It points north, and in the morning, if it's not pointing north, you don't have it, like you didn't have enough testosterone during the night. Your insulin sensitivity decreases in a lot of your tissues by about 30%. Your appetite will be increased. I didn't have time to get into that, but the only time any animal on this planet other than humans sleep deprive themselves is when they're starving and they need to get up earlier to be able to go further and find new food, or if they're being preyed upon, like if they're somebody just another animal stalking them or something, they're going to sleep as much as they need to. So it makes sense that us being on this planet for as long as we've been here, our brains probably think the same thing, and so your body reacts to sleep deprivation as if you're in famine. And so your appetite will be higher, you'll crave fat, you'll crave sugar, because those are survival mechanisms. Of course, your energy will be worse. Your prefrontal cortex, which is what allows you to do executive functioning, it allows you to pay attention, allows you to understand what I'm saying, allows you to predict what might happen in the future. If you take any one of these 5 or 6 paths, what would be the best outcome? Like that simulator, that part of our brain makes us the smartest animal on this planet. That's the function of that lobe is decreased about 30%. Attention deficit disorder, attention ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'm dumb, but I'm slow. ADHD, ADD, whatever you want to call it. The symptoms, look at the symptoms of that, look at the symptoms of sleep deprivation. Identical. You cannot tell those two apart. Has the same impact. I think that probably 90% of kids who are diagnosed with it are just sleep deprived. If you have kids between 16 and 25, they're 3 times more likely to die in an automobile accident from drowsy driving than they are from drunk driving. Divorce rate increases about 30% in people who are chronically sleep deprived, probably for the reason we talked about earlier. I can go on and on, but you guys can look all those up. Put in anything you're interested in. Very quickly, the sleep product that he was talking about, I designed, never finished my story, but when the SEALs came in, over time what I figured out is that sleep was their performance tool that they were missing. Obviously, it's a culture that doesn't value sleep very much. We go a week without sleep during training, and you're just considered weak if you can't push through and work when you're sleeping. And then I became a doctor, which is probably just as bad. It's probably 2 of the worst professions out there. I totally lost my train of thought. What was it?
Your product? Sleep product.
Oh, the sleep product, yeah. I told you about. So my sleep product, it's a combination of supplements I put together because the SEALs were all using Ambien, which everybody thought was completely benign at that time. They thought you just take this, you sleep great, you wake up the next day. And if you know special forces guys, military guys in general, it's like 1's good, 2's better, 3's great. So chase that down with a couple of cocktails. I told you all about GABA. Basically, all the sleep drugs act like GABA. They're just a lot more powerful than GABA. But they decrease REM sleep by about 80% and deep sleep by about 20%. Alcohol does the inverse. So you take alcohol and sleep drugs, you get 0 sleep. You lay down for 8 hours, you wake up. If we do a sleep study, it's 99.9% stage 2 sleep. So I wanted them to all get off of Ambien. I couldn't just say, suck it up, buttercup, like quit taking this. So I got them, I just did research and said, okay, what supplements have been proven to help with sleep? Once I got them all together over the course of about 6 months, I just kind of adding one at a time. Then I realized why all those helped. So it took a while to figure out why I was doing what I was doing, and the shows helped me to develop the dosages of it. And they were having to buy it all at still, local nutrition stores and all that stuff. So they arranged me into making a product, and I was just going to make it and sell it to the still team and go about my business being a doctor. And that was 9 years ago, and I'm still doing it. But all it is the melatonin production pathway. So we talked about what melatonin is, what it does. It needs to be continually secreted throughout the night. Your brain changes throughout the night, but melatonin is important throughout the night. And so the melatonin production pathway, I put a very, very, very small amount in there, because if I give you a lot of melatonin, just like any other hormone, I give you too much, your body quits producing it, your body quits being sensitive to it. And then I take it away and produce a normal amount of melatonin, and it's not nearly enough. So it's a very, very small dose, about 1/5 of what you need to get through the night. And then I put in there magnesium, well, I'll go back. So tryptophan, you guys heard of that, an amino acid, that becomes 5-hydroxytryptophan. Then with vitamin D3 and magnesium as cofactors, 5-hydroxytryptophan can become serotonin. Serotonin then becomes melatonin. Okay, melatonin then does all the stuff we said. And then I talked about stress hormones being high, causing sleep problems. There's a supplement you could all take for this sport specifically. You could take it during the day as well, which is where most of the research is athletic activity. But it's called phosphatidylserine. It's in my supplement, and it decreases stress hormones. It decreases cortisol. So when you exercise intensely, one of the things that goes up is your cortisol levels, and again, that's catabolic and it's counterproductive to your exercise activities. So there's a little bit of that in there. And that's it. There's nothing magic in there. There's no tricks. Like all pharmaceuticals, they're a trick. They're like, well, this is the way sleep normally works, so we'll make this molecule that works a lot better than that and makes that happen more. Or, we'll take something away that you ordinarily need to be awake, and then you'll fall asleep, and it's a trick. There's no tricks in this. I'm just bringing lumber to the construction site. If you don't have a construction crew there, it's not going to help, and that's primarily the stress component. All right, I'm going to stop there. About 5 minutes over. Anybody have any questions? You can talk about anything. Like I do anything performance related. But
So you talk about sleep drugs. In your opinion, is it worse? What's worse, unconscious or awake?
what's worse?
Like if you can't sleep, like I've had shoulder problems that wake me up like 5-6 times a night, and I've had to take like half a unison just to get through the night. I know it's not ideal, but which is worse, unconscious or awake all night?
Well, in that example I gave about doing everything you can with the list and not paying attention to the time, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you don't look at the clock and you lay in bed and you meditate and you relax, if your alarm clock isn't going off for 3 hours, you're back to sleep at some point. You don't really know, it doesn't matter. If you're awake for 1 hour out of that and you sleep the rest of that, you got 7 hours of sleep and 1 hour of meditation. Great. Like that's way better than getting out and going into the room, like I'm gonna read a book, I'm gonna watch something, whatever. But when you take away that thing I talked about going from the stages, going across time, like that's called histogram. If the structure of that, we call that sleep architecture, so the structure of that should look it's very noticeable. I should be able to look from across the room and I can say, oh yeah, that primarily deep sleep at the beginning of the night, primarily REM sleep in the morning, like in those cycles, 90 to 120 minutes, and I can say, oh, that's good sleep architecture, that guy's getting good sleep. That's what sleep is about. That's all that matters, is the sleep architecture. Being unconscious for 10 hours doesn't make a damn bit of difference. Like you're not getting the hormone secretion, you're not getting the repair. So it's much better to get 4 hours of sleep and relax and meditate for 4 hours.
So waking up, like, let's just say I'm just waking up every time I get light sleep because of the pain in my shoulder. It's better to just get myself.
Just lay in bed, as long as you're not worrying, as long as it's like, hey, I'm gonna breathe in and relax, I'm gonna meditate. You know, put on some headphones, do guided meditation if you want, listen to diurnal beats, anything to just calm you out because you're lowering your stress hormones. All of that stuff lowers your stress hormones. You can, if you're a good meditator, you can get stress hormones equivalent to deep sleep. I mean, you have to be a really good meditator to do that. Like that's a lifelong achievement. But laying in bed and recovering whether or not you're sleeping or not is much better than taking a sleep pill.
And you don't have anything that against people who like listening to something to fall asleep, like having some chatter going on.
It's not ideal, but I do it. My wife's behind, she'll tell you, I do it every now and then. It's just like, hey, it's not a good night. I'm throwing a podcast. Within 2 minutes, I'm sleeping. If I don't turn the podcast on, I'm up for 3 hours. You know, sometimes just my mind's gone and I didn't write my list. That's usually what it is.
Can you get too much sleep?
It's hard to. Usually, if somebody's sleeping much more than say 9.5 hours a night, and when I say that 8 hours, that's about 7 hours and 15 minutes in some people, all the way up to about 9 hours and 15 minutes for other people. The more active you are during the day, whether cognitively or physically, the more you stress your body, the more your resources you use, the more repair that has to happen, the longer you need to sleep. So if you and it changes day to day, right? If your normal day is such, and then the next day you run an ultra marathon, you probably need to sleep 12 hours the next day. But if you need to sleep like 10 hours plus all the time, there's usually some other metabolic issue underneath that. Frequently it's depression, but it could be anything. It could be blood glucose, it could be chronic inflammation. There's all sorts of things it could be. But just get everything evaluated. You're not old enough, it doesn't look like for hormone problems to be the issue.
How do you feel about cat napping? So perfect example, like our evening class, our adult evening class is from 7 to 8. Right, so by the time I get home, if I roll a little bit afterwards, or by the time I get home, it's probably about 9 o'clock. I have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready for work, so that's my 6-hour window right there. So how do you feel about cat napping?
Yeah.
To try and make up those
Naps are a great idea. And I'll cover this other point really quick. I usually go to some talk. I forgot to cover it today. If I took, and since you're all in jiu-jitsu, we'll use jiu-jitsu. Great example. So if you come in, you train with Michael and say, I want to work this technique, you work that technique for an hour. If you came in at 7 o'clock in the morning and did that, and then he said, I want you to come back tonight at 7. You're not going to train during the day, you're not going to watch videos and all this stuff. Just go about your day and come back at 7 o'clock tonight. And then without any more instruction, I'm going to evaluate how good you are at that, or how good are you at that skill, right? You'll be worse, right? Because it's decayed over the day. Now, interestingly, without any new information, like he just tested you, that's all he did. Try it, okay, that's not, go home. Then you go home and you go to sleep. When you wake up the next morning, you will be better than you left the training, okay? Interestingly enough, if you put a nap in between that, you come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, he teaches you a technique, you take a nap at noon, 30 minutes, come back at 7 o'clock, you will perform as though you went home and slept. And then, when you go home and sleep, and you come back the next morning and test, you will perform again as though you went home and slept. So I've done this with UFC guys, whatever the weakness is. If they're fighting a striker and they're a grappler, or vice versa, and they need to really bone up on the other skill. But some of these guys are capable of training, napping, training, going home and going to sleep. They get 6 days of training, essentially, right? Because every time they come back, they're better, as if they've slept. So a nap is defined as anything really between 20 minutes and 120 minutes. At 121 minutes, we call it sleep because it's more than a sleep cycle. If you go past about 45 minutes, or probably if you go past about 35, 40 minutes, you'll probably be in deep sleep. Not a bad thing, it'll just be really hard to awaken from. All your stress hormones are low, the things that are keeping you alert aren't there. So you're gonna have to fight your way back awake when you wake up. But as small as a 15-minute nap will restore creativity. So if you're somebody who has to think creatively, like Jiu-Jitsu players, that restore your creativity. Then say 15 to 30-ish minute nap, 15 to 40 minute nap, something, 20 to 40 minute nap, somewhere in there. It will increase your prefrontal cortex, I was talking about, your problem solving abilities, your executive functioning, your memory, your verbal fluency, all that kind of thing. And then if you sleep that full block, you get some of that nighttime repair, the muscle repair, decrease, even a secretion of hormones. So you'll increase anabolic activity, decrease catabolic activity. And again, so up to 2 hours a day, whether it's 6 20-minute naps or one 2-hour block, up to 2 hours a day. It's not as good as sleeping 8 hours, but it's a hell of a lot better than not doing anything. It's probably 60-70%. That's good. Also, people who have chronic insomnia or take sleep drugs on a chronic basis, which is just defined as 6 months or greater, die on average 12 years earlier than everybody else. People who work night shifts for an extended amount of time in their career die on average 12 to 14 years younger. First responders, long haul pilots, all those types of people, ER nurses and doctors and all that.
It just made me think when you were talking about naps, what do you know about like polyphasic sleep and breaking up sleep into smaller and smaller?
It's a mitigation technique. I know Tim Ferriss wrote a lot about it, wrote that big paper and he got abused about it. His take on it wasn't that sophisticated. Like we use it, special forces and things use it because there's plenty of times where you're just not going to get much of any sleep in 3 or 4 days before you go out on an op or something and you have to do the op. But it's a mitigation technique.
It's not a lifestyle.
No, it's not a lifestyle. I mean, you're definitely still harming yourself, but just not as much. Like I said, you can increase your cognitive abilities a little bit, take a 40-minute nap and go back to planning your op or preparing for all your stuff. So it helps, but it's not something to move towards as a goal. Yeah.
You mentioned caffeine kind of briefly.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about regular coffee drinking in the mornings? Is it,
So caffeine, remember I said adenosine causes sleep pressure, makes you tired. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. As soon as the caffeine's gone, the amount of adenosine is all that matters. So what we end up doing, another function of caffeine is that it stimulates our adrenals and increases our stress hormones a little faster. So our body can get used to any rhythm. You could drink coffee every 3rd day and your body would get used to that. And all that's happening then is that you're waking up with lower stress hormones because your body knows you're going to drink coffee and you're going to drink your coffee and you're going to go to the stress hormones you would have had if you didn't drink coffee at all. I'm not telling you not to drink coffee, just telling you that's the way it happens. I use caffeine, I think there's nothing wrong with it. It is a hormetic curve and everybody processes it differently. So if you're blocking the adenosine receptors, you're gonna have a hard time falling asleep. If there's caffeine in a significant amount of caffeine in your bloodstream when you're going to bed, the half-life of caffeine is anywhere from 4 to 30 hours, depending on you, your liver function and what your enzymes are. So some people can drink caffeine in the morning and be wired until the next day. Some people can drink caffeine and 4 hours later, there's only half of that in there. But it's a hormetic curve, about 200 milligrams of caffeine is peak. That's peak performance enhancement. Anything after that starts going the other way, where you'll feel super alert and like you're on it, but you'll be scattered as hell in your, it's like being on any kind of stimulant, like you think of like an actor on coke, like acting all weird, that's what excess caffeine does. It makes you feel like you're getting things done, but your performance is getting worse.
So,
And it has a little bit of an analgesic effect. So it'll extend your ability to do jujitsu because it decreases pain a little bit. It gives you a little more energy, and your VO2 max will increase a tiny bit, like 3-4%. So, it is a performance enhancing tool, and I'm not against it, just as long as you figure out what works for you as far as not having a bunch of caffeine in your system when you're trying to go to sleep.
and is that really the extent of it? Because I know from a genetic panel, I'm a caffeine sort of I respond less than caffeine, and other people I can drink caffeine after dinner, and I can usually still go to sleep pretty
Yeah, yeah.
So is it really just how much caffeine is left in your system, or is it stress hormone that's combined with drinking caffeine?
Yeah, I mean, again, the 200 milligrams of caffeine is a small increase in adrenal function. When you go into 3, 4, 5, 600, like you go, you can get 600 milligram coffees from Starbucks. Like one large coffee is 600 milligrams, and that causes a lot of stress hormones. And you'll notice that because like you're sweating and you're jittery and you're shaky. That's not blocking adenosine. That's stress hormones. So as long as you're staying around that 200 mark, and it's not exact. I mean, for you it might be 250 because you're fast metabolite, or someone else might be 150, but in the ballpark of that. That shouldn't spike your adrenals a whole lot. Now, I wouldn't say drink coffee and try to go to bed 2 hours later, and under any circumstances, right? That doesn't make any sense. So I wouldn't. Most people I say don't drink it past midday, because if you're average, you know, if you drink it at noon, at 6 p.m., you're still going to have half in your bloodstream, and then another 4 hours later, you're going to be almost a quarter. And most people can go to sleep around that if they've gone to higher than that max of 200.
Outside of like sleep recovery, is there anything that you would suggest or discourage as far as like BCAAs or like protein immediately following a workout of 30 minutes, or just kind of like for extra muscle recovery?
I mean, in broad strokes, no. What matters the most is probably if you want to judge everybody's metabolic health in here, and you said I can only have one lab, would be insulin sensitivity. So like how well does your body use insulin? How much insulin do you need to take your blood glucose down to a fairly low number, which means it's all going into the muscles for something like this or performance. So knowing that is the most important component. But let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that everybody here is, say, average with a small carb load after workout, I would highly recommend. And you want something that's fairly complex, so you want more something like a sweet potato or something than you do sugar, right? There's something called glycemic load, which is the total response, the total amount of sort of glycogen, glucose, the load, everything under the curve, how much impact that is, and then something called the glycemic index, which is how fast it causes the change. Really fast changes is very disruptive to your metabolics, like all your metabolic systems, your hormones and everything else. So you don't want anything that shoots your blood glucose up and then straight back down. So like simple sugar, but high fructose corn syrup would be the most significant, the most severe form of that. Protein, I haven't seen really convincing evidence that it matters when you have your protein, as long as you're getting adequate protein throughout the day. I think adequate is a lot higher than most people say. A lot of people say 1 gram per pound. I think it's 2, closer to 2. Probably in women a little less, just because you do have a little bit more muscle mass, but 1.5 maybe or so. And then as far as stimulants, I think caffeine is probably a good one. Nicotine is good. I know a lot of people don't like nicotine associated with cigarettes. That's just happenstance. Nicotine itself is just as safe as caffeine. I have nicotine gum in my mouth right now. You could absorb it into your bloodstream through the side of your mouth. That enhances neurological functioning quite a bit, especially in conjunction with caffeine. Anything else?
Yeah, just the BCAAs, I guess.
I don't know. What do you think about the BCAAs, Brandy? I'm not sure it's any better than the protein, but
Yeah, I think it's
she's
just
probably
depending
smarter
on
than me.
what your amino acid pool is in general. I think you have.
Yeah. If you have amino acid deficiencies, then that makes a lot of sense. Then
You were saying you think that protein should be 2 grams per pound of body weight?
yeah.
So like I should have like 360 grams of protein a day?
Yeah.
Really? I don't know how I get that. Getting 200 grams of protein is like,
Start eating.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot. But I'm talking about somebody who's like trying to enhance they're trying to get faster and stronger and better. Like they're doing strenuous things on a general basis. Joe Blow, who never exercises, sure, one's plenty.
Yeah, I mean, you already is at like 60 grams for women or something.
Yeah.
80 for men.
Yeah. And technically it should be over lean mass, but you know, when I tell people to, nobody's getting it. You know, like I don't need 500 grams of protein a day. I'm not so much lean mass, but that's kind of the goal that I'm going towards. You know?
Speaking of food, like I know I've heard some rules from people like Huberman or Sachin about like 6 hours before the midpoint of your sleep is as late as you should eat food. What do you think about eating late?
That's all theoretical. It's all theoretical crap, really. I think Huberman's interesting, but if you pay attention, like he reads one article today, 3 days later he reads an article that contradicts the one he talked about the day before. He's just reporting the science.
Sure.
You know? He's not somebody who's out there
But
practicing this. So I mean, I do practice this all the time. I have private clients, and I work with people. That's what I do. I do performance-based medicine. I help people perform better. That's it. I don't treat disease. And so when you eat, as far as like repairing your fuel system, is repairing your body, getting stronger, I think that's a bunch of crap, because that's only happening during deep sleep, period. But you don't get stronger during the day. You're never going to repair it. So as long as you have enough protein, as long as you have enough resources when you're asleep, so that means it has to be digested. You don't want it in your stomach when you're going to sleep. You want it in your bowels, so you want it, for that reason, I'd say no closer than probably 2 hours. But if you have glucose control issues, then it matters what you eat and how close to bedtime as well. So, like I told you, that the only animals on the planet that sleep deprived themselves are the ones being preyed upon, the ones being stalked, and the ones starving. So one of the ways your brain registers whether or not you're starving is a quick drop in blood glucose. It doesn't matter if it's dropping from 400 to 300. That's crazy high either way, but that change will wake you up. It'll make your body think you're starving. So if you have blood glucose control issues, or if you eat something like a really simple carbohydrate like sugar or high fructose corn syrup, you're going to get a big spike and you're going to get a big crash. And as soon as that crash happens, that's going to stimulate stress hormones. It might wake you up, it might not wake you up, but it's going to interfere with your process of sleep.
But it's not really a matter of like digestion being something that's going to interrupt you falling asleep.
No, digestion should not at all.
Okay.
You're actually being in your stomach might. And it's because there's some correlation between stomach hormones and weight promoting neurotransmitters.
Where does alcohol fall into all of this? Is it as disruptive as caffeine if you're taking it too close to sleep? Should it be avoided completely? What is your stance on that?
I default to Rob Wolf's quote, which he's been saying for 20 years, as far as I know. You want to drink as far away from bedtime as possible. And that doesn't mean wake up and drink. It just means, kind of as early as you can get your drinks in. And then have one drink of say like 12 ounces of water for every one alcoholic drink. Because you're minimizing dehydration, and I'd even say put some of the element in there. When we make margaritas, we make it with a lemon lime element, like to increase the hydration, But sleep, like I was saying earlier, sleep decreases. If you go to sleep under the influence of alcohol, especially like if you're using alcohol as your sleep aid, it will decrease deep sleep by about 80%, which means it's decreasing testosterone and growth hormone and some sensitivity by about 80% as well. And it decreases REM sleep by about 20%. So I don't say avoid it absolutely, especially the younger you are, the less all this crap matters. When you get my age, it really matters. But I just keep it moderate. I think a standard drink is pretty weak. Like most drinks are probably 2 standard drinks if you're drinking kind of cocktail or something. So I'd say 2 real drinks, 2 normal American drinks. Probably no more than that per day. There's other metabolic dysregulation, but as far as sleep impact, as far away from bed as possible. And you stay out here. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the element, and 1,000 milligrams is a lot of sodium.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider how salty the food that you consume generally is with
Yeah.
a modern diet, how processed everything is if you're not eating
Right.
What would you recommend as like optimal intake?
I titrate element by bowel movements. Yeah, like too much magnesium, it's like that's too much. Yeah, but I think Rob calculated that out to be for an athletic person pretty much the electrolyte combination you need throughout the day. For the average Joe. So one packet of that stuff a day. I don't know if you know like John Warren with huge NFL guy, he does 2 packs a day. I can't do that. It all depends on you individually, but I'd say when it starts causing GI distress, you've gone too high. And if you notice that you have a lot of, say, like swelling in your ankles or your hands feel fat and just uncoordinated, and you're probably too much sodium is the most likely component of that. But just figure it out for yourself, just kind of tinker around and what works for you. I don't think there's anything prescriptive for it. All right, that's it. Thanks.